What do you tell your teenager that wants to smoke cigarettes like you? And this is a tough one. Now, if you're a cigarette smoker, like I was, and you have children, like I do, there's going to come a point when, if your kids grew up with you smoking or your spouse or partner smoking, at some point, most kids want to emulate their parents. They see their parents as examples, like a teacher is an example, a relative, a policeman, a policewoman, a member of the military, a first responder. These are generally people that they see as being heroes, somebody they can look up to, somebody they can trust. And if you copy them, or a baseball player, for example, a football player, if you copy them, chances are you may see the same success they had. But certainly a parent is just the superhero to most children growing up. So if a child, 5-year-old child, sees a parent constantly picking up a cigarette and smoking a cigarette, they think that that's probably the best way that they can, go about their life too. Now, with this question, I want to first again lay it out there. This is me speaking as a parent and through experience. I'm not a health professional. I'm not, licensed. I'm not credentialed. So if there's any question or concern, what you should do is consult somebody that's a qualified professional to answer your questions. This is simply advice, like we were sitting at a bar, like we were sitting at a card game, like we were sitting having coffee at a restaurant, and telling you what worked for me and what I would believe would work for most people. So thankfully, I mean, we have 4 children. Thankfully, it was really only one of them that ever really had this concern about cigarette smoking. The other 3 just completely stayed away. And what I found really is that it's that old adage: honesty is the best policy. The very best thing that you can do with your child that wants to smoke cigarettes is, well, let me stop right there. Let me back up a little bit. Let me tell you about what happened to me when I was younger. When my parents found out that I smoked cigarettes, what actually happened, my second day of 11th grade in high school, I walked around the front of the building and I lit a cigarette up just as the assistant principal saw me and promptly brought me right inside and called my parents and said what had happened. Now, again, the change in times. The reason why I got in trouble at that point was the fact that, and this is true, I wasn't smoking in the designated student smoking area. Students had a designated area to smoke, which was the area directly behind the cafeteria that was neatly walled in on at least 3 sides, which would make it very obvious that if you were parents or anybody else was driving by the outer part of the high school, it'd be very unlikely that you'd see all these students puffing away there. But that was, if you were going to smoke and you were a student, that was the place you were supposed to smoke. I smoked in a different spot. That's why I got in trouble. That obviously things are very different these days. With that said, my parents said to me, because they were both cigarette smokers, they said to me that if they didn't want me to smoke, but that if I was going to smoke cigarettes, they suggested that I didn't do it behind their back. They wanted me to be upfront and honest and smoke in front of them. Now, that was basically good advice. What I ended up doing is I did smoke. I mean, I was at that point, probably 16, and I did continue to smoke up to around age 50. So, I mean, it didn't end up causing me to not smoke. Let's put it that way. So, again, going back to that original question, though, I think by being honest with my children and showing them and telling them these things, telling them when I started smoking, telling how it got increasingly good to me and how I increasingly was dependent on it, telling them, explaining what nicotine did to me. They saw if I got a cold, the cold would be 4 times worse than it would be for a non-smoker. So many things were so much harder. They'd see and say, well, it doesn't it taste good? And I'd be like, well, yeah, I kind of wish it had more garlic, more salt, more something, because I couldn't really taste things very well. All these things are impacted when you smoke cigarettes. So I tried to just be upfront and honest with them and explain that the benefit that you may see, that the advantages, which are really none, are far outweighed by all the disadvantages for you smoking cigarettes. And then these days, when you add the tremendous cost and the fact that cigarette smoking is People that smoke cigarettes are more outcast these days. Again, when I was younger, it was very socially acceptable. Wherever you went, people sat down and they had a beer, they had a cup of coffee, and they smoked a cigarette. It was just the standard fare. You ate, you had a meal with friends and you lit up cigarettes at the end of the meal. It's not like that. And thankfully, it's not like that. But the point is, I try to tell my kids that we know better now. We know it's not a good thing to smoke. We know the dangers of smoking. We know the costs of smoking. We know that all the ways that smoking impacts your life in a negative way. And thankfully, knock on wood, none of my children nor my wife smoke cigarettes. And again, I've been successful 15 years ago in quitting and had never really looked back. I think that is the in a perfect world, nobody would smoke cigarettes. But if you have a teenager, especially, or basically a child of any age that sees you as their role model and they want to smoke cigarettes, whether you find out because you see a pack in their pocketbook or in their closet, or somebody comes and says, "Hey, did you see Johnny smoking a cigarette over there?" Or if they actually just come to you and say, "Mom, Dad, I want to smoke cigarettes," your best bet is to sit them down and tell them how you felt about smoking, even if you're a current smoker, tell them if you'd like to quit, maybe they could help you quit, and maybe that might be enough to keep them away from smoking. But do anything you can to stop them from becoming cigarette smokers. If you never start smoking, you'll never have to stop smoking. So, if you want to know what I did 15 years ago to quit successfully, I'd ask you to click one of the links around this video. Please like, please subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you as an ex-smoker.